Hey readers, I'm Danny.
And I'm Leandra, and we are not reading for content.
This is a monthly book club podcast dedicated to reading in depth and leaving no plot point unturned. Each month, we read one book over the course of 3 episodes, basically reading 1/3 of the book at a time. Feel free to listen along, or better yet, read the book with us. Our first season of the book club has the theme of genre blends. A list of books and the club schedule will be in the description.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Not Reading for Content, where this month, we are focusing on the genre blend, The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. So for this episode, we are reading parts 1 through 3. If you haven't read those parts yet, then feel free to stick around, maybe hear the summary, and then just to be warned, we're going to continue discussing full spoilers. We aren't going to hold anything back. So just want to get that out of the way. Also, as we are progressing through this first season of Genre Blends, we also need to look ahead and make sure that you are prepared for season number 2, which is translations. For those titles and for the months that we'll be reading them in, they will be in the description no matter where you're listening. So be sure to check that out. Either go buy them, put your holds in, just be ready for our discussions. But for today, our focus needs to be on the Games Gods Play, and we will get to that. But first, we need to do our bookish bite of the week, and it is my responsibility to provide that. So, Danny, my question for you, in honor of this first third of Games Gods Play, what are your thoughts on Trials? Do you like it as a narrative arc trope? And can you give those listening at home a certain recommendation that features Trials?
Sure. I would say trials in general for me aren't like something I look for. I don't hate them and I don't love them, but I do think that I am pickier with books that have trials in them because I've seen them so often. As we all know, we have books that kind of follow the same lines. Hunger Games, a lot of books reference Hunger Games. And I know that there were books similar to Hunger Games that have that like competition version. Within the book, we know that we have Akatar is one of them. Red Rising is another one that a lot of people have talked about is similar, and Hunger Games will be referenced. And I just think that if authors aren't careful, I can get bored. And so I think that it has to have some type of a unique twist, or it has to be really heavy on character development. Because if I love the characters, then I'm going to be intrigued in their plight, in trying to figure out, are they going to survive? What are they going to lose in these trials, competitions? And if the characters aren't the main focus, then the trials, like I said, need to be very unique. They need to have something that is catching my interest, maybe a little bit of a puzzle, or something to pique my interest and keep me wanting to see the next trial, because otherwise it just gets really repetitive. For my recommendation for this, I would say Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko, which is a YA fantasy that I rated 4 stars, which for YA to get a 4 star for me, I have to absolutely love it, because usually YA isn't my jam because of characters. Typically, I don't like reading from a younger perspective. But I think the characters in this are absolutely phenomenal. The story is heart-wrenching, and you really get to see the characters develop over time. It's a duology, so if you guys aren't really series readers, but you would like to get a taste, I think it's a good place to start. What about you?
Well, regarding Trials, I have to agree that I am not enamored with them. I don't think it's something that I seek out. I wouldn't argue that I try to avoid that type of story arc, but as you said, it's very well used, is what we'll say. I think it's especially well used in YA circles. This idea of a competition, of trials, of almost like battling to the death. A lot of times that for some reason we have teens always battling to the death. And obviously the Games Gods Play is an adult book, so it's in its own kind of separate category for that. But I was reminded of quite a few trial books that I've read, and most of them do seem to sit in the YA category. And you're also right in arguing that if you're someone who doesn't like that type of repetition, because it is very repetitive, it's a bit predictable, arguably at times, because we're going from one stage to another to another. Obviously, the goal is to either get the answer correct, there's some type of riddle that they have to accomplish with every trial. Then what's going to keep you invested are the characters, the relationships. So that 100% makes sense to me. I also may have a bit of an interest in these little mini trials, these mini riddles as a mystery reader because I
Yeah,
love a puzzle. I love
totally makes
seeing
sense.
characters trying to work things out. So I do enjoy that. I find those kind of fun to watch the characters finding clues, pairing them together, and then coming to some type of solution. With that said, obviously it's so quick that I have to just accept it with little bursts. So that might be the one criticism I have for it, is that you barely have time to really register what's happening, and then the characters are moving on. For me, my recommendation is also YA. It's actually the Sunbearer Trials by Aidan Thomas. I ended up reading this as a recommendation last year from someone who is a very big YA reader, and I'm also known for not really reading YA. I don't tend to vibe with the tone that you find in the
Mhm.
YA category all the time, but for some reason, when it came to the Sunbearer Trials, I just accepted that these characters were YA, they were talking YA, and they grew on me. You know, there's this time when suddenly I felt this switch where rather than me kind of rolling my eyes at their dialogue, I thought, oh, okay, they're actually really cute. They're very sweet. I have to root for them. And it's really fun to see our main character, who is a demigod, who was never meant to be a part of these trials. And I suppose what's really adding to the conflict is that what makes this unique is there is a ranking in the end. The demigod who ends up getting first place, who becomes the victor, they then have to sacrifice the demigod who ends up in last place. So there's this tension of, do I even want to win? Because then I would have to perform this, terrifying act. And there's a lot of nuance as far as this, because we're also dealing with a trans main character. So I can recommend this to those who may want to explore trials, especially starting at their roots. Let's start at YA because it seems like that's their origin in a way. But without further ado, let's actually start talking about the games gods play. But I think, Danny, you're going to give us a summary first.
Oh, yes. I am tasked this week with
You are.
giving the summary. And this is one of the larger books that we've covered in this podcast. So I will do my best, my friends, but the summaries are definitely going to be a little bit uh, lacking in some detail. So you'll have to stick around for the discussion if you want the juicy bits. So, our first part of the book starts with our main character, Lyra, who is part of the Order of Thieves, and she is on a mission or quest or something for the Order of Thieves. And as she goes out, you get to learn about the fact that she's not actually a thief for this organization. She is not a subtle person, not a nimble person by any means. And so she's kind of been put on watch. She has her own set of skills that are useful, but not in the capacity that she would like them to be. We also learn from Lyra that she has been cursed from childhood, actually, from before she was born. Her mother ended up giving birth in Zeus's temple, and he was mad at this development and ended up cursing her to never be loved in her life. And so we get her thoughts and feelings and some of the problems that she's had in life due to this. For instance, she was given up by her parents at a very young age. And so that is one of the reasons that she is in the Order of Thieves, which is an organization of children, really, who grow up trying to buy their freedom, essentially. And she, in a little bit of a fit of rage, goes after Zeus's temple and runs into Hades, the god of the dead, and she's trying to throw a rock at Zeus's temple, and he essentially stops her. And that's where their initial meeting goes. Well, the day after that was the choosing for the Crucible, which is the games, literally the games gods play that happens every 100 years, where the gods come down and choose humans to play at their behest to win this crucible, which will choose the next god of Olympus. So Zeus is the current god of Olympus, and they are competing to figure out which god will be the next. And Hades chooses Lyra. So within these first three parts, we have followed Lyra through the first three trials. So, with that summary given, what are your initial thoughts on the book?
All right. We all knew that Danny and I were pretty nervous going into this romantasy. We've also heard kind of, mixed reviews. Some people adore this book, as you'll see on review sites and other platforms, but obviously it's not well loved either. And Danny and I, you and I, aren't the biggest fans of this, this genre blend. So we were really nervous about it. And I'll say, I'm pleasantly surprised that I don't hate it, is what I'll say, which I know is kind of crazy to say, but I want to warn everyone that I was coming off of reading When the Moon Hatched and Fourth Wing. Both of those books have received 1 star from me or lower and I DNF'd both of them. I don't even really tend to rate books that I DNF, but these two, I was like, I'm going to make an exception because I really hated them. So I came in shaking in my boots reading this book. And I was like, is it the best book in the world? No. But I was like, I'm finding this a lot easier to digest and to just simply listen to because I'm listening on audio. Whereas the main characters, our main women protagonists, which we can get into the other two books, I could not stand. And I'm like, Lyra, I don't find her very special. I don't find her that intriguing of a character, but I'm not hating her. I
Yeah.
don't find her annoying or like too naive when she's in the trials. So I'm kind of I'm appreciating her as not like ticking me off like the other women protagonists that I've seen in romantasies. So I will say that like it's not, again, it's not going to be something to write home to, like write home about, but I am surprised I'm not immediately having it grate on me. How about you, Danny?
I don't think that it's grating. I just am a little bored.
Hmm.
And so I guess with where my expectations were, I do think that I probably am pleasantly surprised because I also read When the Moon Hatched. I read Fourth Wing, but it was a little bit ago, and I didn't hate it. I just thought it was kind of a fun time. Whereas When the Moon Hatched, I know you disagree. I When the Moon Hatched really did irritate me, and part of that was the main character. I feel like there are a lot of things in this that there are like little tiny things in this that I'm finding little nuggets, and really it's been within the trials and the connections back to the mythology that I've enjoyed. I thought that part was very fun, but there are certain things, specifically her curse, that I just keep kind of rolling my eyes because we're supposed to believe that she's unlovable or that she's not supposed to be loved by people, but it seems like she's kind of loved by a lot of people. She literally has, which we can break all these events down, but she has Boone break into Hades' house to give her items. We have Hades, who is clearly showing some form of interest, whether or not it's lust. I know that she talks about lust over love or whatever, but he also hasn't killed her or smited her for talking back to him. And so, like, I feel like there are certain circumstances that we don't understand about her curse, and I do think that we've gotten hints that maybe she doesn't understand her curse as much as she thinks that she does, so I think that it will eventually be explained, but that part of her character has annoyed me a bit because she seems very much like she's leaning a little bit too heavy into this thing that has affected her entire life, and I don't really see evidence of that. I feel like we're getting told that it's affected her a lot more than we're getting shown.
100%. And I'm glad you brought up the curse because that is something that what I don't like about it is that it inherently is telling us that we need to find other people loving us to find value, that
Yeah,
we can't simply like enjoy our own company, love ourselves, know our place in the world. We need someone else to adore us, to
yeah.
love us. to feel any worth. And, who knows? We've got so much of the book to go that we could have our character grow and realize that that's not the one thing that you absolutely need to be happy in this world. And there's been some mentions that it's not just romantic love, it could be it's family, friends, even, because she attributes her treatment that she receives from her parents because it was 3 years old, she ended up being simply given to the Order of Thieves to pay off their debts, but also there's the suggestion that it was related to the fact that Zeus also, like, what a crazy thing that Zeus curses her because her mom's water broke in his temple, like, as if anyone has any control over that. I think that's crazy. And why curse the baby? Why not
Yeah.
curse, the woman who basically peed everywhere? Like, I don't know, and I know that's not what happened, but you know what I mean. So I feel as though that doesn't really make any sense. And I am almost wondering, and maybe it's just because I'm like the only way that this could make sense, especially with everyone obviously, showing some respect and appreciation for her, befriending her in certain ways, is that someone's lied to her. I mean, she was 3 years old when she was dropped off. She shouldn't have any memories. Like,
True.
you're a baby, 3 years old, barely talk, can't even talk, whatever. I don't know how babies work, but I have no idea what development you're at 3 years old. That I'm just assuming that you can't really walk very well. So how can you do anything else? But I would wonder if she's been lied to by this Felix person, because she's mentioned him so many
Mm,
times. We never even meet him. And I feel
yeah.
as though the number of times he's been mentioned, who is her boss, kind of I guess the man on top for the Order of Thieves, who kind of orchestrates all of this. He's the one kind of mentor, guardian figure that she's had, and she keeps bringing him up. So I'm thinking we're eventually going to meet him, and we might find out that he lied to her, and that
Yeah.
was to basically keep like free labor. She's got nowhere else to go, and she keeps doubting herself. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking. But I agree that her dependence on this, like, curse being broken just so she can feel love, feels like a lot.
Yeah. Now, one thing I have enjoyed and have been surprised with, I mentioned this a little bit, was the little tidbits with the trials, but also some of the things that they mentioned with the gods. Some of it we don't know yet. We know that somehow Persephone died. So that was
Mm,
an intriguing revelation because I was thinking as we were going in that she was going to be whatever, Persephone incarnate or whatever, some version, but maybe from a different name.
right.
And no, we found out that something happened that, and I'm sure we'll figure out what in the storyline. And so that was very intriguing to me. I do like certain characters that pop back up. The three-headed dog for Hades. I really enjoyed his character. I can never remember their names. Cerebus?
Yes,
Cerebus?
Cerebus, and then she names them Sir, Burr, and Russ. Oh, because Cerebus. Is that why? Is that why? Yeah.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed their character, Hermes and, like, the flying sandals. Like, there were little snippets of things that we got throughout the storyline that I did like to see. All of that is dependent on literally my understanding of Hercules. I have some of it from, like, some other things, but Hercules is definitely where my source material is coming, and so that kind of made my heart happy. For those of you listening who don't know or haven't watched my channel or haven't heard me talk about it, Hercules is one of my all-time favorite childhood memories and movies. It's a comfort movie for me. And so seeing certain things like that in this story, I have really loved, but I'm not in it for like the intellectual piece of it. It's almost just like seeing characters that I'm familiar with and seeing them interact in a way that makes sense for what I know about their history.
Yeah, I do enjoy when I see a connection and I'm like, "Oh, that's satisfying that I recognize this
Yeah.
figure and what they're known for." And there has been some explanation, which I can appreciate the author doing. For instance, there was like this little scene, ended up being this kind of crazy wackadoo scene where we see Poseidon just drunk and belligerent. But when, what is it? Lyra ends up going to this bar on Olympus for the gods, or it's some sort, and when she goes in, she realizes it's a bar that's owned by Dionysus, who I believe is like the god of wine, and just it makes sense. And then when she goes up to the bar, the bartender is described as I think their name was Lethe, and they were the god of forgetting and oblivion. And I was like, well, sometimes people go to the bar to forget. And I'm like, I find that very funny that that's like this little thrown in detail. So those have been really fun. I also enjoyed her interaction with Aphrodite. She ends
Ooh,
up
yeah.
running into Aphrodite, and Aphrodite saves her from, of course, we have the classic buffoon Neanderthal, like evil guy, Dex. There's always that in a trial or a competition. There has to be this guy who literally has one thing on his mind, and it is violence. I really don't get it, but it's just like a tried and true, I guess, trope at this point that we can just expect. So I enjoyed her getting to know Aphrodite. And yeah, Cerberus was so cute. I loved that we got the 3 dogs. And I think this is where the fact that you and I aren't super, well versed in Greek mythology, I wish I knew more about the background in, the myth of Persephone and Hades. I know that
Mm.
I think in the original text, she gets kidnapped by Hades, and that's why we have the seasons. Because I think she was like the goddess of spring or something to that effect. She might not have been a goddess, but she, or a nymph of spring, something to that effect. And he allows her to leave. They create this deal, and so that's why we get the seasons, because she comes back up to the overworld, ends up having spring and summer, and then when we have fall, it's because she has retreated back to the underworld in some way. But the reason why I'm bringing this up as well is because there's a lot of imagery surrounding butterflies.
Mhm.
We've had that quite a bit, and I also have seen that in Lore Olympus, the graphic novel series. So I'm thinking butterflies must be associated with Persephone. I don't know why, but I did get that, and I was like, okay, I enjoy it. I just don't know the origin of it. I guess just
Yeah.
spring. Maybe that's what it is.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure. Speaking of the origin story of Hades and Persephone, we do actually have a romance budding in the story, just not between those two characters. We have Lyra and Hades having some form of a romantic relationship. A little bit hints of it there here and there. Of course, she, believes it to be lust, but I'm assuming it will bud into something more. And so I want to talk about that and what we think about it so far, because I do think that my biggest argument against reading Romantasy is because of the romance elements. A lot of times they tend to fall flat for me. And so with this, I think that there have been certain aspects of it that I have really enjoyed, and there have been certain aspects that I don't. The ones that I don't have been surrounding almost the hot and cold nature of them being in a life or death situation and then being turned on. And she even, like, Lyra says something at some point in time. I can't remember exactly the moment that it happened. I think it was after one of the trials. And she was thinking about his ass or something. And she was like, here I am thinking about his butt whenever I should be considering that I'm going to die in the next moment. And I'm like, yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
pointed out your own flaw. Can we fix it? Like, and it just continues. And I feel like that is something that I've seen a lot of times. I saw it in When the Moon Hatched. It gets brought up that they're in these dire circumstances, but all we can think about is sex. And I'm like, can we have some thought process? I think maybe it's more about developing the relationship instead of going straight to lust and straight to this person is amazingly attractive. Can we get into an emotional connection first? And maybe that's where my hangup is with that element, because I do think some of their conversations, some of the history that is clearly between, or behind Hades' story and being ostracized from the rest of his brothers and sisters as a god, and also Lyra having these issues of not feeling loved in her life. I think that they do have the all of the elements to be really good for one another, to be able to talk to one another and build that emotional connection. And I see it every once in a while, but I just want more of that.
I agree. There is clearly a, building blocks where we could have an emotional connection where they are growing invested in each other, getting to know each other, getting to trust each other. let's work on that first, rather than a lot of times we have these books starting off with being only focusing on physical attraction, and to the point where you are distracted by how hot these people are. And I think you can recognize someone's attraction, objectively, without it obstructing your brain, where suddenly you have to think about someone's like physique without your control. I think that's actually crazy. And there are moments in this book where I think he's comforting her and she's like, I could straddle him right now. And I'm like, no, really, you like, no. You bawled your eyes out. He's just comforting you. Why are we ruining this moment with this really weird thought? So that's kind of, and on top of that, unfortunately, this is a very, cliche type of pairing. We have this, young woman who is so snarky and she stands up for herself, and she talks before she thinks, and he appreciates that about her. And so she keeps, having this back and forth banter, and she'll snip at other gods. And I personally find that to be a tired narrative, to have this Spitfire main character who is thinking recklessly. I'm like, yeah, no, actually a god should kill you. Like you should be freaking struck down with a lightning bolt. How about we have that and suddenly a new character comes in? That would be really funny and interesting. So I feel as though a lot of times we get these characters who they don't get any repercussions. I want someone to be smart. You are dealing with gods who are immortal and they have no time for, this pipsqueak thief who's like, just can't think before they speak, and they keep getting rewarded for them.
Yeah.
And also, the number of times I've read books where it's between the love interest and he says something and she's like, oh, asshole. I'm like, he's really not being an asshole right now. He's just answering your question or being realistic. And I feel like that kind of weird banter, where the one, especially it's typically the woman main character when we're dealing with a man and a woman, she's calling him some type of profanity that he's being like rude or a jerk. And I'm like, you have literally not shown any respect either. And I'm just like, can we just not, like, can we address the hypocrisy for a second and then move forward with it? So that is, and I will say the other thing is her inexperience. It keeps being brought up, and I get why, because it's associated with the curse that she may or may not have on her. And so she hasn't ever gotten close to someone to not only be physically experienced, but again, emotionally, when it comes to even knowing about flirtations and how to move forward in a relationship in a very healthy way. All of that's completely new to her. And I feel like I haven't really noticed the age difference between the two, even though obviously Hades is a god and he's hundreds and hundreds of years old. So I at least that isn't brought up a lot, because I feel like then I'm accepting it because this is a Greek mythology. We have to accept that.
Yeah.
If you go into this book expecting them to be the same age and not have this crazy age gap, what are we doing here? But I will say every time she mentions her inexperience, I'm like, I want you to tell him so he's aware of it. Like, I feel like this needs to be an open communication. That's just me thinking about like a healthy relationship, so that he's knows he's not pressuring you to do anything. So I feel like suddenly I'm her mom and I'm like, please talk to him about this. So that's where I'm at as far as their romantic relationship goes. I like him. I
Yeah.
found him to be an interesting character, and I agree. I think that his background, his relationship to death, how close he is, it probably also explains why he also has never been interested in participating in the trials, because he's like, willingly having another mortal risk their life, and in the end they all come to him. So there's that, and we do see some
Yeah.
risks in this trial. We've seen a couple, people die. At least one died pretty horrifically, Isabel, in that one trial. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the moment when I really loved that conversation that they have, because, that was to bring up butterflies. Lyra did bring up the fact that they are like butterflies, humans are like butterflies to, the gods, like butterflies are to us, because they live such a short amount of time, and so you can notice their beauty, but you don't really care about the consequences of your actions in regard to it, because it seems like such a minuscule thing, and he talks about having to live with them for eternity. and live with the sorrows, not only of the people who've passed, but the people who inevitably come to him who have had to live with those sorrows. And it's just a constant compiling of grief and loss that he has to live with. And so I think that that makes his character very human in a way. It makes him one of the gods that is capable of understanding humanity because of the fact that he lives with it so closely, and he lives with the shortness of life and the grief that comes along with not being able to be with your loved ones forever. So I did really like that aspect of Hades. I have enjoyed his character quite a bit. I want to come back to something that you had mentioned earlier about, can we not just have a smart person, a smart female protagonist, maybe not someone who always has to be snarky or, a sarcastic, passive aggressive person? Can we have someone who's thoughtful, thinking through situations like this? Because I think that also applies to the trials. One of the things, even though I liked some of the trials and I liked some of the mythology aspects that were brought into the trials, what I didn't like is I felt like every solution that we've had so far is always from one of the gods' gifts. It's never the humans solving the trial. It's them using a relic
Mm.
or the gift that they were given. And I would like to see, there's a little bit of puzzling going on, but I think I would like to see more. Even I think it was in the Poseidon trial, the one who won, he used the power to reason through, like, he couldn't reason through the puzzle by himself. He had to have the power that allowed him to think critically in that moment. And I think I would like to see our human characters come to life in their intelligence a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. It seems as the trials at this point, the three trials we've had have more so highlighted that they are stronger when working together. It's
Yeah,
just that most of these, pledges, we'll call them, they are pushing back on that. Some of them have been willing to do it. I think that in the first trial, she befriends a man named Samuel, and then he repays the favor in the Poseidon challenge by helping her. I think I can't remember what he was doing, but I think he swam over to her and either untied her or helped her, something to that effect, where they were kind of working together to untie everybody. And then, of course, in the third trial, her strategy was, becoming an ally with, is it Zai? Is
I
that
think
his
so.
name?
Yeah,
And I think is he working under, is it Hermes? I think it is. That's the god who chose him to represent Hermes. And so I think that's almost what the trials are acting as at this point, is more so our main character, Lyra, trying to figure out how to befriend and also prove herself that she isn't in this to sabotage others and to harm others. She is thinking, we're all humans, we're all mortals playing the gods' games, and that's not fair. We should be trying to help each other survive because we're the only ones who are losing.
yeah,
Uh, we don't see gods losing, any type of sleep at night when something like that happens. Or more so, they're upset more that they lost, not that a human has died. Because even Poseidon, when he ends up losing Isabel in his own challenge, she was his, choice. And he's just really frustrated that he looks like an idiot and that, you know, someone's to blame and it's not him. With that said, I do find the relics and their abilities to be kind of interesting, as well as the abilities that these humans are gaining throughout the challenge, and just hearing what they're doing and what it means and what their abilities are. For instance, their choice not to use their abilities and their choice to use it can have consequences.
yeah,
Even Zai, when she meets him in the Temple of Hermes, he ends up having this back and forth with his own father. And that was kind of an intense scene. And Zai says, it's your fault that I didn't use my ability because I could have saved Isabel, but you told me not to use it. And also, you told me not to trust the other humans that I'm battling against. So, collectively, those two things made me not help her when I could have. And now she's dead. And so, we are seeing these people kind of go through emotional trials as well, and also having to carry that baggage with them moving forward, knowing that they've made mistakes. So I did find that interesting that thanks to Lyra hiding, we got that perspective, because that would have really been the only way that we would have found out about it. And speaking of these trials, of these characters having to navigate, obviously they're lacking in actually truly being kind of a pure solution. They oftentimes need to rely on these abilities. We've gone through 3 trials so far. The question is, with trials, obviously they start to get repetitive, potentially. We don't know how creative this author is going to get. Abigail Owen, if you're listening, we have our eye on you, but we have 2/3 of the book to go. So the question is how is this narrative going to keep going? How many more trials are we expecting? And is there going to be a switch in the narrative? Because it does worry me that I'm having a fine time. I'm not absolutely adoring it. I'm not hating it. It's been a very easy listen while I'm doing other things. It might be a different story if I was physically reading this book personally, but I am wondering how many more trials can we get through before it does start to feel a little bit repetitive. How are you feeling? And where do you think this narrative is going to go?
Yeah, I'm a little worried that it's just gonna get more and more repetitive, and I'm gonna get irritated with the narrative and bored because I already am a little bored. There are little things that I'm hanging on to and little things that I have enjoyed, and it is a very easy read. I'm reading this on audio as well, so I don't feel like it's a slog by any means. I think that it's been very quick, and not hard, like, to understand. It's not complex. So those are all things that are, perks as far as the speed that it's taken me to read this. But if it continues, I think that my brain is going to have a hard time really even paying attention while we're like, if we're just going to rinse and repeat, what's the point? What I'm hoping, and I'm going to make a crazy prediction. What I'm hoping, because we have seen a couple of things that we know that the other gods are pushing back because they really don't want Hades to win. I think that something is going to happen where our gods are going to, either the gods or the competitors. I'm hoping the gods, though. I'm hoping the competitors don't go against her. I think they're going to try and sabotage her or kidnap her or take her out of the competition, try and get her disqualified because they are so worried about Hades becoming the leader of Olympus. That would be my guess. That's my hope, I guess. I should say, not even my guess.
There have been rumblings, though, for sure, where I believe that there was someone who, was it Poseidon, who told her that the other competitors are already plotting against her or something. And so that made her start to question herself. But also, that reminds me, the preface, we ended up getting a bit of a flash forward.
Yeah.
So that scene is going to happen at some point. And it was, I think she was in the fetal position. Obviously, she was in dire straits. She was thinking she was going to die. So we're expecting her to be in critical condition at some point in this book. And was it Zeus who was walking up to her?
Yeah.
So that's going to happen. Who knows when? But I would imagine that I wonder how long it's going to take us to get to that, especially because we kind of already forgot about it. So now that
True.
it's
I
fresh
had
in our
completely
minds,
forgotten about that.
I was like, wait a second. I do think we had a little bit of a something something. So yeah, it was a very brief moment too. It was maybe a page or two, and then we got into the narrative, finding Lyra. I guess one thing we haven't talked about, and we can address it because it's not the biggest deal, but her thing with Boone. How much long are we going to see him again? It's obviously a situation where it's not a love triangle, but it's set up as this weird comparison. It's pretty much just for her to compare him to the person who's meant to be her love interest, Hades. That is something that I have found in a lot of romances in general. Not just romantasy, but romantasy definitely has it. And I've discovered, especially after Fourth Wing, that I find that so tedious
Yeah.
because I'm like, this person, the only reason why they exist is to compare to the love interest and us being like, oh yeah, he is nowhere near as amazing as him. And I'm like, we didn't really need this comparison. We were already game to have her be with Hades because it's Hades. Everybody loves that type of dynamic. So I feel like it's a bit strange. Obviously, he helped her and gave her a few tools to help her. And there's this weird connection with the axes, that they're a pair.
Yeah.
That's something we need to address too, because Hades is surprised to see her have it, because he said he lost one of his pair, and obviously she ended up getting it at some point. It just showed up one day, and she thought it was her relic for, obviously successfully being a part of the Order of Thieves. So that's also something. So I guess I brought up two things.
That was something I found really interesting because I'm pretty sure the axes he tied to Odin. It was Odin giving the axes to his sons, and I was like,
Yes.
"Isn't Odin Norse?" I didn't realize Odin was also in Greek mythology.
But there is mentions of multiple gods. Like they were talking about the Celtic gods too in this world when Poseidon was doing his trial. I think they were saying that they were in, where were they? Were they in Scotland or something, in the caves?
Maybe.
And so she was thinking, "Oh wait, these gods are, interacting with each other." And she was thinking, I'm less well versed in other, mythologies, because she was thinking about the monsters, for instance, and other stories. So that's also interesting, that all of these gods exist in this world, and it's more like who you have your allegiance to. So
Because
that's,
she even talked about how that connects to which underworld you go to.
yes.
Because she said, I don't know if it was when Isabel died or what, but she was talking about as long as you believed in the Greek gods, you would go to the river Styx or whatever. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I did think we also didn't talk about this being set in San Francisco, like the original scene being set in San Francisco, and the electricity in San Francisco is run by Zeus of all people, which I did find interesting. It hasn't been like a huge part of the story, but just a little snippet of something to modernize the story.
Plus, isn't San Francisco the one that has like the light rails that run along the wire electric lines? I think so, because they have like the tracks and then they've got the wires above them. I grew up watching Charmed, which was also set in San Francisco, so that's my background. But yeah, I think that actually is very funny, and it does track that he would. There are certain things that San Francisco uses electricity for. Obviously, any city does, but it is kind of goofy that he just decided to hang out on the west coast of California. Also, what year is it? Is this like futuristic? Or they've got
Yeah.
cell phones. I guess it's just like, we're assuming it's just an alternate 2024 when this book came out. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing, I think Aphrodite was in yoga pants. We're seeing gods. Oh, and there were some kind of funny moments where I think she sees Hades barefoot and she thinks, ugh, it's weird. I've never thought about a god being barefoot. And I was like, I mean, I guess that's true. So anyway, there have been little moments where you are reminded that these gods are interacting with very modern day and like very modern trends for technology, as well as for clothing and stuff. So that's a bit goofy.
Yeah. Well, let's answer our 3 questions, and we can continue on with our read and figure out where this narrative's gonna go.
Sounds good.
So, our 3 questions, just to remind you guys in the audience, we always talk about what our rating is at this point in time, who our favorite character is, and what questions we have for the future pages. So what do you think, Leandra?
Well, I will say that my rating at the moment is a 3.5. I'm finding it a very easy read, as we've mentioned multiple times. I'm not as bored as you are, I would say, because I do enjoy the little puzzles and the little, small interactions with other characters. But I'm also not amazed. I'm not having, this impulse where, oh, I can't wait to keep reading. I can't wait to see what, troubles and, mischief Lyra gets up to, because we know she's going to, obviously, because she doesn't listen to Hades at all and just kind of goes on her way. They keep clashing too. So that will be interesting to see, because she seems to always be right. I think that Hades is trying to protect her, but whenever she, disregards him, I think she gains important information. But so yeah, so I'm thinking 3.5. So could go down. I don't know if it could go up. I will say sometimes you think it could go up or down. I don't know if this book could go up, which is very funny to think about. And as far as, a character that is my favorite in this section, ooh, I did not come prepared, but I would say that um, I did like her interaction with Aphrodite. And I know that she was only there for a moment, but I liked what she represented. The fact that she even says that as a god, other gods underestimate her because she's the goddess of love, and she does play it up. And she has this power though. She can manipulate people, and she knows when to wield it. She knows who to obviously manipulate and who to, be aware of and everything. So I did appreciate that, because there's this knowledge that there is, power within someone allowing people to underestimate them, which Lyra has done. She has let people underestimate her too. So I like Aphrodite, and I look forward to seeing her more. Maybe I like her because she hasn't been on the page very much. So that's always a thing. But yeah, I keep thinking about her interaction with her. So I do like her. And then when it comes to a question I have moving forward, I want to know if she's actually going to create an alliance with a few of these other humans. It seems as though she's gained Zai, but she also doesn't feel fully confident in him. I also wondered if he was attracted to her. Their interaction was really weird after that trial, and I was like, what? But I think they're just meant to be friends. So she's still wishy-washy with him, but I would like to see her grow in having a bit of a larger alliance, maybe with one or two other people. And then they could actually kind of work together. But for now, we don't really know where anyone's boundaries lie, like who's on whose side. So that's a little bit confusing. So I want to know these characters better too, because I barely know who these other humans that she's competing against are.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think my rating right now is a 3. I don't hate it, but I also don't love it. And I would say that it could change for me. It could go up. It could definitely go down. But if it picks up a little bit and I get a little bit more into the story, I could see it going up. So we'll see about that. My favorite character is Cerebus or
Oh
Cerebus.
yeah, that's a good one. Darn it. Yes, I changed my answer. I also like Cerberus or Cerberus, because
Cerberus. Okay.
Cerber and Russ. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I really liked his character. I liked the fact that we have 3 different personalities and that he chooses to talk to her in her head, even though he doesn't do that with anybody else. There's even a moment where he's really excited because she is happy to meet him, and he's like, everyone else hates me, and so like they have kind of a little bit of a bonding moment about that. And yeah, I just really enjoyed his perspective, and so I hope that he continues to be in the storyline. I want to see him again.
And how soft he was. She's like, "You're so soft." And he's like, "What did you think?" Oh, the carnivorous cows, by the way.
Yes.
That was great. And she's like, "Whatever your preference is." They're like, "Yeah, that's our favorite."
So much fun. So I did really enjoy his character. My question would be whether or not Lyra is actually cursed, and if we're going to get a reasonable, good explanation behind why she has lived her entire life thinking that she is. Because if it just turns out to be like someone being a butthole and that she's just believed it, I'm going to be upset about that. So we'll see what happens with that, but that would be my question.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's Felix. I think Felix lied to her. You had a crazy prediction, that's my crazy prediction. I think we're going to meet Felix, realize he's a horrible, horrible person, and yeah, we'll end up realizing that Lyra's kind of dumb.
Remember, next week we are going to be reading part 4 through part 6. So if you guys are following along with us at home, that's what we'll be discussing next Friday. We would love to have you along with the discussion. We hope that you are enjoying this book so far with us, friends. And yeah, we shall see you next Friday. Happy reading.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Not Reading for Content. Be sure to check the description for a schedule of our upcoming reads for this season. And for reminders and other updates, you can follow the podcast on Instagram at Not Reading for Content. Where else can listeners find you, Danny?
I have a booktube and an Instagram. Both can be found at danny.dabbles. What about you?
I have the same platforms. My booktube is at Leandra the TBR0, and my Instagram is at Leandra_the TBR0. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to tune in next Friday for our next episode.